name's Rachel, and it's nice to be here. I only live down the road in Rugby, so that's why I didn't mind coming over here. Normally I work in London, and I'm going to run through a presentation that I did at a conference in London called QCon. And so it was within the context of a track about Agile software development. So there might be stuff that you're thinking, oh, well, that's not really relevant to us. And also I can talk a bit more around the kind of stuff that we do. So do ask questions and stop and say, oh, I don't know what that is, if you don't know what I'm talking about, or I'm mentioning stuff that isn't familiar to you. So, yeah, does this work in order? Right, anyway. So, I started out in software development before Agile was a thing, and I'm sure some of you did. And it's, but I think it was a time when you would work on projects for a long time and they wouldn't deliver, and there would be, and I really, the main reason I got into Agile ways of working was because I was fed up of working. I used to work for Marconi Communications on big telecoms projects that used to get cancelled after we worked on them for a year or two. So I worked there for 6 years, and nothing that I worked on ever made it anywhere, and so I thought this was annoying. Around that time, in the 90s, that's when I was working there, I heard about extreme programming, and my first reaction was, well, there were lots of really odd practices in extreme programming, and at the time the name grabbed attention because there was the sort of, this was just when people were getting into snowboarding and extreme sports, and it was trying to make software development sound cool by saying it was kind of, oh, extreme programming. But I think what that has kind of backfired onto extreme programming a little bit, because then people have thought it's not something you want to be all the time. So what's interesting is I got into working using an XP around 2000, and it was quite popular because it drew a lot of attention, and it was one of the first Agile methods out there. One of the guys at work did this Google Trends thing, and he sort of had this. The blue line is this is mentions of extreme programming. Oh, come back to being full screen. And this red line, that's DevOps. Who's heard of DevOps? Yeah, so it seems to be DevOps. A number of different movements are around that seem to be the new thing, and XP certainly isn't thought to be the new thing anymore, I think. So basically, wait a minute, I'm going to go back. So one of the things about Agile is that there were all these different ways of doing Agile that people talked about before the Agile Manifesto was created, and then they kind of tried to get together, and then they kind of splintered off, and the same thing has happened since. So DevOps, people, and this is DevOps Borat in case you're wondering, and it's a joke account on Twitter which doesn't post anymore, but posts joke things about DevOps, and DevOps is all about bringing automation into things, which was one of the cool things about XP, but not just the only cool thing about XP. We've also got, and actually where I'm going after this is I'm going to the Software Craftsmanship Conference. There's a whole movement of people who are focused just on the pure craft side of writing beautiful code, writing good tests, and you've also got people who are thinking much more about not the technical side, but more like, we're in a startup, what's the simplest thing we can build, and there's a book called Lean Startup, I don't know if you've come across that, and so there are it's almost like the the community that was interested in XP is kind of splintered off into these different schools of thought. And in fact, I was reading a blog post from there's a version 1 survey, I don't know if you've ever seen that. It's one of the few surveys that's done across the industry about what people are doing, what agile practices they're doing. And there's very low awareness of XP, and some people are doing, there was sort of, we are doing some test-driven development or some refactoring, but a lot of it's really watered down, and it's really very much so that the things that I hear are things like pair programming. Oh yeah, we tried it once, or we do it sometimes, and oh yeah, we have some automated tests, and we've tried to automate our build. Oh yeah, and we do some renaming, so we're doing refactoring, and all of these things are very weak forms of XP practices. And so it's quite sad when I hear people going, oh yes, we're doing agile software development, and they're actually doing very, they're almost just saying, oh yes, we do that, but not really doing it. So I think actually it's better to forget all these different labels of schools of thought and focus in on what extreme programming is about. Now, extreme programming, it's, as I said before, the name is a bit odd, but it's basically about an attitude of, if a discipline is good, we do it as much as we can. So in fact, instead of thinking, oh, we might do a little bit of a thing, it's like we try to do it more and more and more, take it to the limit. And the company where I work, we very much try to do that. So this is a picture from the original Extreme Programming Explained book. I don't know if who's read that book? And then there was a later edition where he kind of rewrote most of it. But there are a bunch of practices that are not about code here. So there are things like collective ownership, and on-site customer, and metaphor, and 40 hours a week, and short releases, planning game, and all of those things, people now tend to feel, oh, that's Scrum, or that's some other method, and XP is just about the technical practices. I was working using XP at that time, and maybe some of you were as well, and we tried really hard to follow all the things in the book, but the book didn't have what you were supposed to do in certain areas, and so we made things up to fill those gaps. And so when I was working at this company called Connextra, we added a bunch of extra practices, and actually the company that I work for now, it's really, some of the people who founded the company were also there, and so we still do some of the practices that were introduced that were just Connextra practices. One thing we did at Connextra, which I don't know if have you ever come across that format of user stories as a I want so that. Mm-hmm. So this is all our fault, because we that's the XP book didn't give much guidance about how to write user stories, and we were working with sales teams and we were trying to figure out, like, but why do you want this and who wants it? And so we made this story template, and then that became kind of proliferated around the world, but not used very well. And we do things, we still do retrospectives. Kent Beck wasn't very keen on retrospectives. When he came to write the second version of the XP book, I tried to persuade him to put it in, but he thought it wasn't essential and didn't put it in. Anyway, I will come on to a bit more about what we do where I work now, which is, so this is what's a set of post-it notes, and what I've tried to put in the middle are the core, things that you would recognise as, yes, that's definitely XP. And then what I put around the outside in pink, they're the additional things that we do as well. So things that we really think are important are, we do pair programming on all our production code, we could do continuous integration, and by continuous integration I don't mean we have a CI build server. We don't have a CI build server. In fact, what we're trying to do with continuous integration is to not do branching. So we are trying to all work on the same branch and integrate as soon as possible. And one of the things about what eXtreme really means, you're trying to take any practice that you do and make it continuous. And so what people do now, which is newer, is continuous deployment. And so when I say, some people might think continuous deployment means like it's just going live without you even intervening manually. We do have manual intervention. We're not just we don't just pop code live without looking at it. But we do put code live most days, several times a day, and what we're trying to do is really to try and make changes and deliver value to the business as quickly as we can. So we don't wait for a few weeks and then put a feature out. We put the feature out as soon as we can. And we do actually do quite a lot of testing in our production environments, but that's only possible because we have web environments and clouds, and that makes it easier. So there's a bunch of stuff here that I'm going to talk about how we actually do it. So, oh no, I mustn't press this because this doesn't work. So, as I say, what we're trying to do, if you think about eXtreme and think, oh well, that really means continuous everything, we are really trying to deliver business value to our business every day, and that means when we're discussing features of our system with their business, we try and figure out like what's the smallest thing we can do that we can get out live, get some value, and then this is why our software developers have to do a lot of discussion with the people in the business, and they have to understand how the business works and how we make money, and that's really seen as part of a developer's role. We do pair programming on all our production code, and our environment's set up to make sure that we can do pairing. I don't know, so do you do pair programming here? So our normal setup is here, it's like we have big large screen, we have tables that a bit like this so you can move around them, and we often have both our laptops on either side, and people can have different keyboards plugged in. And the normal thing is that after our stand-ups, everybody is pairing, with the exception of a few people who are doing support. So more recently, and this is a practice that's been added, I think we added it in September, and it's a practice that has been around for a few years. It's called mob programming, and what we do, has any of you been to a code dojo, which is a sort of thing where you take turns to do a practice in a learning session? Well, this is doing that on real production code. So the way we have it set up, we have a big screen here. Each of the teams has a big TV, which is good definition. And then 3 or 4 people will be working in a mob. And then we also have another side screen. So Imran, in the check shirt, he's the driver, he's at the keyboard, and everybody else is in the mob. And what they're looking at the big screen, he's got a screen to the side, he's kind of typing there. And what we do is we then rotate round. So we have a timer which goes off every 10 minutes, and then we switch around. And now you might ask, well, why would we do this? And the reason we do this is because we don't do it on all of our stories. We do it on ones that are tricky or difficult. So if we're doing something like making changes to the finance system, and we want to make sure that everybody knows what the changes were and everybody understands how it was designed, then it helps us, because what we do when we do normal pair programming is we practice pair rotation. So we have 2 people start on a story, and then after the next day somebody swaps out and another person swaps in. And if you ever have long stories where you keep swapping people in and out, you often come back into the story and you're quite surprised by what the code is, because the vision gets lost as you swap in and out of pairs. we try to do it to build collective ownership, but what happens, or what can happen, is that people can miss bits of what was discussed, and then you end up with a story which somehow zigzags around. So mobbing is something we found to help avoid doing it on critical stories. Is it something that you've ever thought about trying here? There's some stuff on. There's a guy called Woody Zoll who has talked about how to do mob programming, and he has some videos of how his team do it. They don't do it like we do it. They have a projector, and they do it in a meeting room, and they have everybody kind of in the meeting room, and people kind of switch around like that. But you might try it on something like this, something like a Lunch and Learn. Try and do it. What we do, which is different than in the original XP, is that all of our developers get involved in writing the user stories and really understanding what the user stories are. So we don't. So these are some developers. Random developers, all looking slightly bored, but Thomas is telling them about a story that he's researched. So what we do is each of us has a particular area that we have to work on, and we go and talk to business people, and we have meetings with them, and we try and discuss what's necessary. But the reason that developers write the stories is because we have the understanding of what the technical options might be, and we're always looking at what's the quickest way we can build something that could be useful. And often we need to understand, there might be a gotcha, a thing that would be, for instance, we work in the world of social and video advertising. There are lots of different advertising formats and standards always coming out. And say, for instance, what these guys are working on at the moment, there's a web advertising standard called VPaid, and we want to do this on a special kind of format, but we don't know if the sizes of the adverts will be too small for it to work. And so we want to check that out first before we build the whole thing. And so that's something that the business people would never know. They'd never say, I want you to make sure that you check that. So a lot of the things that we do first are actually research stories and spikes where we're trying to figure out, is this viable, can we do it, before we start implementing the whole thing. The way that we do our planning is we invite all of the stakeholders in the business to come, and then we present what the stories are going to be. So we propose stories to the business. So if you imagine our department is like a product development department. So, and I don't know if you probably can't see, but there's a list which says chutney iteration and chutney backlog, and there's another one that says marmalade iteration and marmalade backlog. We've changed this just slightly, just recently, but what we're really doing is we're saying, we propose that in the next few weeks we do these stories. These are the most important things for us to work on. But we've also researched these other ones. Do you think, and we have a bunch of stakeholders like our head of operations, our CEO, our head of sales, all in that meeting, and they agree what's the focus of our team. So we go with the pieces of work we could do. We could say, well, we've researched all of these things. Which ones do you think are most valuable for us as a business right now? And then we queue them up and we put all the other things back in the backlog. This picture, this is actually a view from New York. So we have a product manager in New York, and we have a global team all around the world actually. And then half of these people are developers and half of these people are stakeholders. And there's people joining it through Google Hangout. And we use a tool called Trello for our stories because it's quite lightweight, and it's quite simple to create cards and move them around and don't put too much stuff in there. So our idea is that we agree our priorities, but that doesn't mean they're locked down. So if, in fact, sadly I'm missing our story prioritisation today, but I know that we'll agree some priorities, and I know what we've discussed. But I know that next week, if something more important comes up, we may well throw the priorities out. So we don't lock it down like a sprint. We do allow people to change their mind. And that's because we've carved things out that we can do one thing and then deliver it, and then do the next thing and deliver it. They're not all tied together, they're not all a big lump that you have to do. So that means that we can swap different things in and out. The way that we do support, because at any XP team, and I'm sure you have this, once you've made some product and it's out in the world, you have users who want to use it and they have problems using it. And so what we do every day is we have a person from each team called the Lone Ranger who goes and sits upstairs with our business teams, and they provide support. So they're the first line of support. They also use that time to do more story research and have discussions with people upstairs around the business. So, and that Lone Ranger practice, that's something that the teams at Connextra back in 2000 were doing. This is like a 15-year-old XP practice. We deploy and support our own systems, so we don't need DevOps because we do everything ourselves. So we don't have this separation of departments. Everybody knows how the infrastructure works. We maintain our own infrastructure, and anybody in the team can deploy code to live. We do need to make sure that that's protected by running quite a lot of tests. So, and if you accidentally deploy something to the live systems that makes a performance issue or something, then you quickly have to roll it back. But so what we're more used to is the idea that you can put things to live quickly, but you can also switch them back. So we don't have, like some companies have, a sort of we put all the code in another environment and then people test it there, and then they put it in another environment and another environment. Eventually it goes live. Some other people do that. The developers who are pairing on the story will put the story live, and they'll often deploy it several times a day. So I put this picture up because these are screens that are on the walls next to the team, and can you see the blue vertical lines? So those are the deploy lines, and so this is not a very long period of time, this is like 24 hours. So you can see that we're deploying during the day. Sometimes more. Often, if you look at a pattern of what time of day people deploy, there's lots of deploys just before people go home, which is not always wise on a Friday. We have a lot of monitoring set up on our system, so if we have any performance issues, and the rainbow bands, that's really the load on lots of our servers, and so if there's a sudden spike, maybe something falls over and stops working, we'll start getting SMS alerts on our phone, and somebody will be nominated to kind of dial in and sort it out. One thing so some of the things that I've talked about, you're probably thinking, oh well, if I was a developer there, I wouldn't really want to do all of those things, because the developer has to do user support, system support, deploying, maintaining infrastructure, writing stories. You're thinking, when do you write any code? But we do write code, and we write code in pairs, but there is also one of the biggest perks for where we work is that we have this gold card system. So everybody gets 1 day a week to do 20% time, whatever they like. So this is Thomas, he's sitting down, he's learning a thing, and it doesn't matter, nobody has to say you're allowed to learn that thing or you're not allowed to learn that thing. People can look at whatever they like, and so it's actually people do their own personal projects, but people very often use the days to try out new product ideas, or to sort out an area of the code, or to try out a new framework. So it actually does benefit the company a lot by people doing this. One of the things we do, because we have all these different kinds of things that we do, is we have mechanisms to try and check that we are we're getting the balance right of our time. So on the left-hand side of the board is a normal board that you can't see, and that has, not started, in progress, done. And on this side of the board, this has a queue of green cards. Green cards are technical cards they're things that we know we need to do, but they're usually too technical to explain to our stakeholders, so we just reserve a bit of velocity for doing those things. So our velocity is only measured on the stories, and then we do a bunch of green cards. And then another thing that we do is this top bit here. So you see the bit where it's got the Pac-Man symbols on it. Well, so it's like a diary for the iteration. So every day, somebody at the stand-up, people write things in it. So you can see somebody's written mob there. Oh, you might not be able to say. And then somebody's written gel in marmalade. There's different things that people write. But what we use this for is for our retrospective. So our retrospectives are also happening today, and each team will print out photographs of the board, and then they can look at them in the retrospective, and that enables them to remember what happened, because quite often you get in the retrospective, you can't remember anything that happened, and then this is quite a good thing. We have another area here. This area is it's a system of magnets and different colours, and so each person, so these characters are the people in the team. So this is Jason, and this is Aaron and Thomas and Tim and Vicky. And the green magnets, they represent us working on the green cards. The white dots, which you probably can't see because they're on a white background, they represent us pairing on the stories. And so we can see who paired with who. They paired. But so sometimes when we print the photograph of this off, we draw circles so we can see who paired with who, have we been pairing evenly with each other. We also have the red dots are for our gold cards, so we can make sure we use them and we know that we use them. And we have blue dots, and therefore support. So therefore when I was the Lone Ranger and I sat upstairs. This area, it's just a junk area, apart from these are our estimating devices. So if we are having a discussion about story estimation, everybody has one of these Peppa Pig scribbly things, and they write their number up and we hold it up. So we don't use planning poker cards, but it's just a thing that teams do. And actually, the boards, each team board is quite different, but they all have something that's roughly the same as this system. And we have retrospective. So here is our retrospective. Now you can see there's the photos of the board on the table. We've got our product manager in New York, Amy. She's in the laptop there, and she's actually round the table, and she puts her things into the Hangout chat, and we write them out on the post-it notes, and we stick them on the wall, take photographs of it, and we send them back to her. So during the meeting, so she can see what's going on, and we take turns to facilitate the retrospective. So I'm here and I'm not doing the retrospective now, and hopefully Tim did the one for the chutney team, and hopefully somebody else is down to do the other team. But anyway, what we've tried to do is everybody knows how to do a retrospective and could do one if they needed to. Some people like doing them more than others, and so we just sort of take turns. Now, just thinking, one thing about using this is I can't tell how far through I am through the slide, but so can I go really fast just to see how much is there and then come back? Right, so go fast. Right, so what is XP about? Well, it's turning the dials up to 10. There's some stuff that Kent Beck's been talking about making. I might come back to this, but the benefits of eXtreme programming are is we deliver value sustainably, and we also, because we are always delivering change and always changing things, we have very change tolerant systems. So if you're deploying a lot, then you can really quickly undo things and change things. If everybody knows how to change things, again, you're able to work very rapidly. So for us, because we work in a very volatile business environment, this is quite an important factor. There are some deeper benefits, and I think people have this opportunity to develop their skills through the gold cards, through the learning, and because if you have quite a wide role, So we don't have like front-end and back-end developers. Everybody has to know how to do everything. That means that you're very multi-skilled, which means you're always learning things. And that, according to Daniel Pink, is part of motivation, is this opportunity to learn. And also we have a lot of choice. All of our systems are really not about assigning work, they're about people choosing what they want to work on. Sometimes you have to choose between a boring thing and another boring thing, but you do get to choose. And so that's kind of a core thing about XP. So you're already doing some practice about XP, and so what I was just really wanting to do, and when I was talking about this in the conference, I was talking about people really trying to turn the dials up, and that's what the essence of XP is about. So I think I have talked about most of those post-it notes, but I might not have done, and I do want to leave time for us to have some Q&A, so thank you, and have you got any questions?